Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to talk about a blueprint for societal control. But, this isn't what you might think. It's not about brute force or secret police. It's about something much, much more subtle. An architecture of influence that's built right out in the open.
And that really is the key question, isn't it? Because real, lasting control, it's almost never a sudden, violent takeover. It's much more like architecture. It's a blueprint that gets built piece by piece, often so slowly you barely notice it's happening.
So what are we actually talking about here? Well, we're looking at a set of 10 interconnected strategies. And I want to be really clear, this isn't about some grand conspiracy theory. Think of it more like an analytical toolkit. It's a lens for seeing the patterns that can lead to a more passive, more submissive society. And the whole thing, this whole blueprint, rests on 3 big pillars.
All right, let's dive right into that first pillar. This is really the foundation of the whole thing. It's not about controlling what people do. It's about getting in earlier. It's about shaping what people think and how they fundamentally see the world.
So this pillar has 4 main tools in its toolbox. First, you've got the control of information and knowledge itself. Then there's the standardization of thought, pushing one correct way of thinking. But the next 2, they're even more subtle. We're talking about reforming language to change what words even mean, and something called psychic anesthesia, basically keeping people so distracted and numb they can't focus on what's important.
And this idea of reforming language, wow, it is an incredibly powerful tool. Think about it. When you change the words we use, you actually change how we perceive reality. So mass layoffs become a restructuring. Civilian deaths become collateral damage. See what's happening? It doesn't just soften the blow. It's designed to obscure the truth, to make these harsh realities harder to grasp and definitely harder to criticize.
And that leads us to this really fascinating concept, psychic anesthesia. The core idea here is that a constant, never-ending stream of distraction, things like reality TV, endless consumerism, even just superficial social media scrolling, it all acts like a kind of mental painkiller. It keeps us feeling stimulated, it keeps us busy for sure, but the end result? We become passive, disengaged from the stuff that actually matters.
Okay, so once you've started shaping the mind, what's the next step in the blueprint? Well, you move on to constraining daily life itself. And that's exactly what Pillar 2 is all about. This is where the focus shifts to limiting what people can physically do by boxing in their autonomy and their personal choices.
And this pillar relies on 3 mechanisms that are just deeply intertwined. You have economic dependence, which makes people vulnerable. You layer on mass surveillance, which makes them fearful. And then you bring in new technologies of control to manage their behavior. See how they work together? They create this powerful climate of conformity where it's just easier to go along than to push back.
Now, this breakdown of economic dependence it's just fascinating. It shows this vicious cycle, right? You start with precarious work, like the gig economy, and pile on chronic debt. That creates a massive vulnerability. And when people are that vulnerable, they have very little choice but to accept really undignified conditions just to survive. That constant economic anxiety, it's a powerful, powerful tool for keeping people in line.
And then, layered right on top of all that economic pressure, you have mass surveillance. Now, it's almost always sold to us as a tool for security, but its deeper effect, its real purpose in this blueprint, is to discourage dissent before it even starts. Because if you know you might be watched, what do? You start watching yourself. You begin to self-censor. You avoid doing anything that strays too far from the norm. So, you've shaped minds. You've constrained lives. What's left? Well, the blueprint's final pillar is maybe the most destructive of all, dividing society against itself. The entire goal here is to just shatter social bonds, to make sure that no large-scale collective opposition can ever get off the ground.
And this pillar uses 3 really devastating tactics to isolate us from each other. First, it fragments society. It turns different groups against one another. Next, it creates or inflates a common enemy to redirect all that public anger outwards, away from the real issues. And finally, it goes to work weakening the very institutions that are supposed to be our protectors. The courts, a free press, and so on.
I mean, this is the classic divide and conquer strategy, right? It's timeless. When you can promote these really deep emotional divisions, whether they're based on politics, identity, whatever, it becomes almost impossible for people to find common ground. And that intense polarization keeps everybody busy fighting each other, instead of looking up and questioning the actual structures of power.
And this is like the final lock being clicked into place. Think about it. When those independent institutions that are meant to be our guardrails, a free press that can investigate, a judiciary that enforces laws fairly, universities that encourage critical thinking, when they are slowly chipped away, when they're stripped of their real power, what's left? There are no more checks and balances. Power can be used pretty much however it wants.
Okay, so we've just walked through this whole blueprint, shaping minds, constraining lives, and dividing society. It's a lot. And the obvious question is, so what do we do? What now? Well, according to this analysis, the single most powerful defense we have against this kind of architecture is just simple awareness.
And look, the point of all this isn't to make you feel hopeless. It's actually the opposite. It's about empowerment. Because the first step is just to recognize these mechanisms when you see them in action. The second step, strengthen your own critical thinking, question the official stories. And the third, and maybe the most important step of all, is to foster solidarity, to consciously build connections and bridges across the very divides that are designed to keep us apart.
So, we're going to leave you with this final thought. This framework, it isn't an answer sheet. It's a lens. It's a new way to look at things. So now that you can see the architect's blueprint, what patterns do you start to notice in the world around you? Because just recognizing them, that's the first and most crucial step. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.